Welcome to the Journey to Prosperity for All, a program where we look at and reflect on the activities of the PPPC government in office for the last 2 years. My name is Shaquan Gill and I am your host. And with me for this discussion is the Prime Minister, Brigadier Retired Mark Phillips. Prime Minister, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Mr. Shaquan Gill. I think it's the first time I'm being interviewed by you.
Yeah.
Okay, and I look forward to our discussion.
Prime Minister, I want to ask you firstly, what was the government like upon your assumption of office in 2020?
Well, 2020, let me reflect on 2020. We had the COVID-19. We were in a state of lockdown at the time of assuming office. We have endured 5 months of the electoral impasse, as you know. The APNU AFC lost the election. They knew that they lost the election by the close of business on the, election was on the 2nd of March 2020. By the close of business on the 3rd of March 2020, they knew that they lost the election, but they try in so many ways, legal and otherwise, legal meaning going before the courts, to hold on to power. However, it was inevitable in the sense that democracy prevailed and the rule of law did prevail. And at the end of it all, through diplomacy, through the court system, through whatever protests they would have mounted and we would have mounted, we end up forming a government on the 2nd of August 2020. COVID-19 was rampant. There's little or nothing that was done in terms of leadership, especially during a pandemic in Guyana. So, on assuming office, we literally hit the ground running, trying to fix everything in every sector of government in Guyana. So it was a state of affairs that I would consider that was negatively impacted by poor leadership and the lack of respect for the rule of law. And we literally had to fix everything in Guyana.
Prime Minister, in what ways has the administration made itself accessible to the people of this country?
Well, the PPP civic government has a history of being people-centered and always connected to the people. Even in opposition, we were connected to the people. So on assuming office, the connection was already there. So it was a case of us working through all the levels of government. We at central government, working with the RDC, working with the Neighborhood Democratic Council, working with the Community Development Councils, and starting our development projects with the people, not only in mind, but being part of everything that we are doing in Guyana, everything that we started on the 2nd of August.
As well, in addition to that, as a matter of fact, there's been a strong focus on measures and interventions to put in place that cushion the effect of cost of living and inflation and all of these other things. How does this tie in with the manifesto promises made by the PPPC?
The manifesto promises made by the PPPC is a developmental approach manifesto, and even without the supply chain challenges, and so we've already had a blueprint that we went to the elections with, and basically we were ready to implement that blueprint after the 2nd of March 2020. So notwithstanding the 5 months delay, on the 2nd of August 2020, immediately after we were sworn into office, we basically started to implement all the projects and all the programs that we had in our manifesto, and all the emergency programs and projects that we had to deal with. As you can recall, one of the first things that we had to deal with was in establishing the COVID-19 hospital. What the last administration did is that they renovated a building and they had a ceremony that put up a sign naming it, but it was not functional. So that's one of the first things that we had to do as a government to make it functional so we can deal with all the cases associated with COVID-19 and to, reduce the impact on the wider Guyanese population. You'll hear more from our Minister of Health when he speaks, but definitely we had to ramp up and increase the testing. We had to increase the ICU equipment to deal with the disease. And, there's a series of measures that we had to go to Parliament with our force budget, or emergency budget, to fund, okay, to help Guyanese to, get back on track in terms of their lives and livelihood. As you recall, in that force emergency budget, there are some 200 taxes and other measures that we effectively remove to alleviate the sufferings of the people at the time when we took office.
Prime Minister, just turning a little bit to your sector, or what you have responsibility for, specifically the energy sector. The government has been speaking a lot about bridging the gap between the hinterland and the coastal plain in terms of ICT and economic growth. What are some of the ways that this has been done in and around the country?
Well, you talk about two things here, energy and ICT, and both of them have their own gaps. You have the ICT, we talk about the digital divide. The energy, we talk about the energy divide. In terms of ICT, there are several programs aimed at improving connectivity between the coast and the hinterland. And we have seen the importance of these programs and the need for connectivity, especially during the pandemic when schools were closed and we had to do a lot of online learning. And so we didn't have the capacity to do it as we should, and we've since then continued to build that capacity. But what is important is that one of the things we did early on assuming office is we issued a commencement order that liberalized the telecommunications sector. And that itself provided a platform for us to build on. Okay? As it is today, we have a number of programs that are aimed towards bridging the digital divide. We have the Hinterland Poor and Remote Community Program, which is about $17.1 million United States dollars, that will be utilized to connect just about 200 hinterland poor and remote communities to the internet. The telecommunication sector liberalization itself has led to investment by all the major service providers in Guyana. That itself will contribute towards bridging the digital divide. We have also Wi-Fi, GY, free Wi-Fi Guyana program that is, basically increasing the number of communities and the number of individuals who are now connected to the internet. And we have a series of hotspots in all public places, whether it's education buildings like schools, health buildings, hospitals, health centers, and other public spaces where you can now have free Wi-Fi hotspots. And all these are measures aimed at bridging the digital divide. In terms of the energy divide, we took over a system where there was not much attention paid to the transmission and distribution system. So while we're at a stage where we have an increase in generation capacity, especially in the Demerara-Borbis interconnected system, the transmission and distribution system is undergoing massive maintenance now, a maintenance that should have done before we assume office. We have several microgrid projects and solar projects with different hinterland communities to ensure that they have solar power. And once you have solar power, it could help with ICT connectivity too. We have just about 30,000 solar panels that are already funded and being paid for and is being shipped to Guyana, hopefully before the end of the year, and that will be distributed to 30,000 households, especially in the hinterland area, and that will help to bridge the digital divide. And I mentioned microgrid projects. We have some mini hydro and micro hydro projects that will also benefit many communities in the hinterland. These are projects that are started, in some cases just about to be started, already funded. So before the end of, I would say, 2023, there'll be a vast improvement in the electrification of many of our hinterland communities. So all in all, we have these projects that were started since August the 2nd, and some are now about to be started, and the whole aim is to bridge the digital divide, bridge the energy divide throughout Guyana. Also, I would like to mention at this stage, another important project,
Sure.
the gas to energy project. As you know, recently we've already identified 2 contractors to start laying the pipelines to bring the gas to shore. And you know, from that project, that some 300 megawatts of electricity will become available from that project on its completion. And that will not only provide adequate, reliable, and clean energy to Guyanese, but also will lead to the reduction in the electricity rates that we pay in Guyana now. Some 50% reduction in what we pay for electricity now. So that's a major project that all Guyanese are anxiously awaiting the completion of. And of course, as I mentioned, it will result in tremendous benefit for us. We have the Amelia Falls project that will provide 165 megawatts of electricity that we pursue into. So all in all, we have all these projects aimed at not only reliable and sustainable energy, but also in keeping with our low carbon development strategy 2030 to move towards greater use of renewable energy. You know, we use a lot of fossil fuel energy now. Let's move towards greater use of renewable energy. Okay? Some may argue that the gas to shore itself is some form of fossil fuel, but then it is clean and it is cheap, and we see it as a transitional source of energy. But the more transformative energy in the mix is towards renewable energy, and that is the solar, the wind, and the hydro. So by 2035, somewhere around 6 to 7% of the energy used in Guyana will be from renewable sources of energy.
Wow. Prime Minister, as we continue our conversation, I want to ask you, from the office of the Prime Minister specifically too, what more can Guyanese expect in the coming years?
Well, we talk about bridging the energy divide. We talk about bridging the ICT divide. We've done a lot of contingency training in the area of disaster management. You know, the Prime Minister is also responsible for managing disasters. We've done a lot of contingency training in the area of disaster management through the CDC, where we're dealing with like the possibility if there's some oil spill. But separate and apart from that, improving the work of the CDC, their ongoing training and exercises, and investment by the government. You know, early this year, we've opened a disaster management facility in Region 9. Okay, so Region 9 more or less can manage a disaster within the region utilizing the facility, and we've trained the officials at the RDC level especially to manage disaster in Region 9. It is our intention to have similar training and similar facilities in the near future, developed for other regions, based on a priority, of course, based on how vulnerable those regions are to disaster. And of course, with that, the headquarters. We have a brand new headquarters, CDC headquarters on Thomas Land, and this year we'll start the construction of a bond to, hold relief supplies. All in all, this will help us to quickly respond to disasters any part of Guyana. A job that we've been doing fairly well so far, and it is our task now towards improving our capacity in that area.
Finally, Prime Minister, we've spoken about the long-term plans that the government has. How would you describe the government's vision for continued development and transformation, looking at these long-term plans for Guyanese in the coming years?
Well, we have a strategic approach for development of Guyana. And the whole aim, as I mentioned, and I keep repeating, people-centered development. The whole aim is to improve the lives and livelihood of the people of Guyana. Essentially, I see Guyana as a poor country. Okay, we've struggled over the years with development, and the development is based on the revenue from the resources and on oil resources. Today we have oil and gas, which has increased the revenue flow to Guyana. And the government's strategic objective is to bring development, to fund development that will improve the lives and livelihood of all the people of Guyana. And here we're talking about this year, 2022 is the first year that we're utilizing money from the Natural Resource Fund in our budget, right? And a lot of the money is going towards funding the sectors that will have immediate impact, positive impact on the lives and livelihood of the people of Guyana. We talk about better roads, not only roads from the coastland to the hinterland. Everybody know about the Linden to Mobura Road. We're talking about better roads to access our farming communities. We talk about better roads in all the communities where people live, all the villages. And I did mention earlier, because I went into Melanie over last weekend, but 3 weekends before I went into Buxton, and I told the people in those communities that this is development that is coming to you in your community. It doesn't matter where you're located, who you voted for, right? We, based on our manifesto promise, is that we are focusing on improving the lives of livelihood of people throughout Guyana. So it's better housing, an increase in housing, because housing, when you give a man a house, or you allow a man or help him to get a house, you empower him, right? So housing drive is a big part of our development agenda. We talk about infrastructure, all types of infrastructure. We talk about the digital divide, the energy divide, improving health facilities. Only 2 days ago on Sunday, the president had a turning of the sod for the pediatric and women hospital, specialty hospital. And we have about 6 other hospitals that we're building in different regions of Guyana. We're modernizing existing hospitals, right? The schools, we're improving our school system, not only by building new schools and repairing existing schools, but equipping those schools for the delivery of education in a modern sense, utilizing all ICT technology that is available. You call any sector, the security and safety sector, a lot of money is being spent there to improve the operations of the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Prison Service, the Guyana Fire Service, and basically every sector of Guyana will benefit from this development trust that the government is on, because we believe that by expending the money and improving the sector, we will improve the livelihood of the people of Guyana. And of course, money is not only spent on physical infrastructure, but also on people. We have the Gold Scholarship. We have increased the number of subject areas where scholarships are being offered to the University of Guyana. And we are on the track towards, by 2025, be in a position to have free education from nursery to university. Right? Nursery, primary, secondary, university. Okay, so that's why I mentioned, and I keep mentioning that our objective, the One Guyana concept, development for all Guyanese, and development that is people-centered.
Prime Minister, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us, have this discussion with us today. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
This has been The Journey to Prosperity for All. I'm your host, Shaquan Gill, saying goodbye for now.